We want to take you now to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Officials are releasing a highly anticipated grand jury report. It actually details alleged abuse by hundreds of Catholic priests right across the state. Let's listen in.
Assistance was indispensable to our investigation. Over the last several months, an intense legal battle has played out between my office and individuals who have concealed their identities through sealed court filings. These petitioners, and for a time some of the dioceses, sought to prevent the entire report from ever seeing the light of day. In effect, they wanted to cover up the cover-up. They sought to do the same thing that senior church leaders in the dioceses we investigated have done for decades: bury the sexual abuse by priests upon children and cover it up forever. Shamefully, these petitioners still don't have the courage to tell the public who they are. Moments ago, an 884-page report issued unanimously by the 40th statewide investigative grand jury, the largest, most comprehensive report into child sexual abuse within the Catholic Church ever produced in the United States, was released. It builds on the Boston Globe's Spotlight report, which identified 229 abuser priests, the 2005 Philadelphia grand jury report into the Archdiocese, which identified over 60 abuser priests, and the 2016 Altoona-Johnstown investigation conducted by the Office of Attorney General, which named at least 50 abuser priests. The report published today, in accordance with the July 27th Pennsylvania Supreme Court order, has some redactions. Let me be very clear. My office is not satisfied with the release of a redacted report. Every redaction represents an incomplete story of abuse that deserves to be told. We have oral argument scheduled in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court for September the 26th. And you can be certain that we will fight vigorously to remove every redaction and tell every story of abuse and expose every cover-up. While those redactions represent just a very small fraction of the predator priests named by this grand jury, no story of abuse is any less important than another. Today, Pennsylvanians can learn the extent of sexual abuse in these dioceses. And for the first time, we can begin to understand the systematic cover-up by church leaders that followed. As the members of the grand jury wrote in their report, we need you to hear this. There have been other reports about child sex abuse within the Catholic Church, but never on this scale. For many of us, those earlier stories happened someplace else. Now we know the truth. It happened everywhere. This lengthy report was written by 23 committed grand jurors based on extensive testimony and documentation. It goes into great detail about widespread sexual abuse and cover-up within the Catholic Church. I respectfully ask for your patience as I walk you through the contents of this report. And while I will endeavor to give a full accounting of the report so that you get a full picture of what transpired in the shadows over decades, nothing I can say in the time we have together today will do full justice to the 2 years of work done by these grand jurors. I ask that you take the time to read the report. This painful body of facts and documents contained in it, which is now posted on the Office of Attorney General website. Now I will lay out the following: the unprecedented scope of this investigation, the abuse, diocese by diocese, charges resulting from this grand jury investigation, the systematic cover-up by church leaders, the weaponization of faith, the failure of law enforcement, and finally, the recommendations of the grand jury. The grand jury investigated 6 dioceses: Allentown, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Greensburg, Erie, and Scranton. Their work built on previous grand jury investigations into the Diocese of Philadelphia and Altoona, Johnstown, and paints a complete picture of abuse and cover-up in every diocese in Pennsylvania. The grand jury investigation began about 2 years ago because we realized during the Altoona-Johnstown investigation that the abuse and cover-up was not just limited to that region, but it was pervasive throughout the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Dozens of witnesses testified before the grand jury, detailing acts of sexual abuse by priests and how senior church officials covered up their criminal conduct, prioritizing their institution over the safety and welfare of these young boys and girls. The grand jury subpoenaed and reviewed 500,000 pages of documents, internal church documents, and official records. The abuse scarred every diocese. The cover-up was sophisticated. And all the while, church leadership kept records of the abuse and the cover-up. These documents, from the diocese's own secret archives, formed the backbone of this investigation, corroborating accounts of victims and illustrating the organized cover-up by senior church officials that stretched, in some cases, all the way to the Vatican. The term secret archives is not my term. It is how the church officials themselves referred to the troves of documents sitting in filing cabinets just feet from the bishops' desks. In each diocese, the bishops had the key to the secret archives, which contained both allegations and admissions of the abuse and the cover-up. The grand jury uncovered credible evidence of sexual abuse against 301 predator priests. As shocking as that number is, the grand jury report notes that the jurors didn't automatically name every priest mentioned in the documents and the secret archives. They actually received files on more than 400 priests, but were careful not to name names if the information was too scanty to make a reasonable determination about what had happened. Over 1,000 child victims were identified by our investigation, though the grand jury notes that they believe that number was in the thousands. As the report reads, we should emphasize that while the list of priests is long, we don't think we got them all. We feel certain that many victims never came forward and that the diocese did not create written records every single time they heard something about abuse, the grand jurors wrote. As I detail the grand jury's findings, I will use graphic language from the report that may make some uncomfortable. But these words are the only way to adequately explain the sexual abuse committed by priests upon children. This is not to be salacious. It is to share the truth, to keep a promise I made to these victims that I would, in their words, talk about what this abuse actually was, and not rely on the euphemisms that church officials used for decades to cover it up. You see, church officials routinely and purposefully described the abuse as horseplay and wrestling and inappropriate contact. It was none of those things. It was child sexual abuse, including rape, committed by grown men, priests, against children. Above all else, they protected their institution at all cost. As the grand jury found, the church showed a complete disdain for victims.